Hello again, race fans. Hey, if your Carrera digital slot car used to go and now it doesn't, could be that your digital chip went out on you. It's not difficult at all to change, so stick around, we'll show you how and provide some useful tips along the way. A couple things before we get started. First, this is not a video on how to convert an analog car to digital, but rather fixing a car that's already digital. And second, I'll probably be using the terms chip and decoder interchangeably throughout the video, but both terms refer to the same thing, which is this digital decoder chip. Now, these Carrera cars are pretty stout and reliable, but on occasion you can have an electronics failure. And the procedure for swapping the chip is rather simple, but first, just a sanity check and be sure that it's your chip that's failed. Now, if you know for sure it's the chip, like it has that unmistakable smell of burnt electronics, or if you actually saw the magic smoke come out, then skip to the timestamp below. Otherwise, check these things first. Do other cars run on the track and not just the one in question? Obviously, if other cars don't work too, then maybe the issue is the track and not the car. Next, check the pickup braids, or as Carrera calls them, double sliding contacts, and be sure they're making good contact with the track. Just a note though, even if the lights are on the car, it doesn't mean the chip is good. And be sure the car is programmed to the controller you are using, and I know this all seems like common sense and doesn't need to be mentioned, but hey, sometimes you can totally miss the obvious, right? Also, be sure the controller is working too by checking that other cars do in fact work with it. If it's wireless, the battery could be dead, or the controller could have just stopped working. Sometimes they can go bad too. So if all of the above check out, then it's time to remove the body from the car. Most Carrera cars have 4 screws, some only have 3 however, with 2 up front and 1 in the rear. And if you're one of those, like me, that can easily lose parts as soon as I remove them from the car, go ahead and take those screws and just stick them to the magnet on the bottom side, and that way you know where they are when you put it back together. Check all these little connectors first to be sure that they're fully seated. They fit pretty tight, so they're not likely to work themselves apart unless they weren't correctly seated in the first place. Check the wires to be sure nothing has broken away, most notably the red and black wires, which provide power to the chip from the pickups, and the motor wires, which are the purple and gray wires from the chip to the motor. On this C7, one of the wires has broken off the motor, which is obviously why the car wouldn't run, so I'm confident that the chip is fine. I just need to resolder the motor wire. On this other car though, that also doesn't run, all the wiring looks to be intact, so most likely the decoder is at fault here. So I'm going to go ahead and swap it out. Now, Carrera makes several different decoders depending on the car, so be sure to get the correct one. I'll put detailed info on what chips are for what cars in the description. We need to disconnect all the power plugs. Now, the wires are all color-coded, so there's really no guesswork when plugging everything back into the new decoder. The green and yellow wire combinations are for the headlights. Some cars have separate leads for the left and right headlights, while others will only have one lead for both. That's if it has headlights at all. Some cars don't, like the F1 and NASCAR models. There's a single screw that holds the chip in. Remove that and then pull the chip. Depending on the type and age of your car, your old chip might look different than the new one, but don't worry, as long as you got the right part number for your car, it'll work. When installing the new one, be sure to get the orientation correct. The side with the switch and the infrared receiver is the bottom. After installing the new chip, reconnect all the wires, and if your car only has one lead for the headlights, you can connect it to either connector on the decoder and tuck the extra one out of the way. Also note that the wires need the correct polarity and therefore the connectors are keyed and they'll only go in one way. Be sure all the wires are tucked neatly inside the chassis and that nothing will rub against the tire, and most importantly, all wires are clear of the gear train. And, very important, before putting the body back on, check the drive wheels to be sure the axle or the motor isn't binding. If it is locked up or difficult to rotate, it's entirely possible that that's what caused the chip to burn out in the first place, and if it isn't fixed, you'll just burn out the new one too. In which case, see if there's something interfering with the rotation, such as lint in the bushings or even an axle that isn't fully seated. And since the body is off, it's always a good opportunity to clean out the car. And a chassis lube is never a bad idea either. I hope this helped you out. Please give us a like, subscribe if not already, Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.